I am going to be joined on stage shortly by Brett Roddis and Jim Whelan, who are going to be talking to you with another great presentation. So please join me in welcoming them to the stage.
Hi, Jim.
Hi, Brett. Okay, so good morning, everyone. Thank you very much for coming along. We're going to take you through a very whistle-stop tour of an engagement that lasted a number of months. Clear Strategy, my business, partnering with Chubbies, where Brett comes from, really on a journey of insight to evolution and really transformation of the Chubbies brand. So by ways of introduction, I'm Jim Whelan, Managing Director of Clear Strategy here in the US. Brett?
Hi, my name is Brett Roddis. I lead the Human Insights and Innovation team at Chubbies.
Fantastic. So, I'm not sure how it's going to work in this format with everyone with their headphones on, but can I get a show of hands, hopefully I can see with the lights, of who's heard of Chubbies? Brilliant. This is going to be the even more difficult part. What words or associations come to mind when you think of Chubbies? Please feel free to shout out. Yeah? Any more for any more?
Weekend. Good going.
I'm sure you
here.
count, but we'll go with it anyway. Okay, so we're going to talk a little bit through the history of Chubbies, but essentially Chubbies, the way it started out was purveyors of short shorts. But actually the brand stands for much more than that. From a product perspective, it also offers swimwear, activewear, casual wear, some of which we are donning today. So please allow us to indulge a little bit, because I think it's the only time we're ever both going to be on a catwalk, or as close to. But more recently they've branched into pants and also kids' clothes as well. From a brand perspective, as one of our colleagues on the front row might have just shouted out, the brand has always stood for fun, light-heartedness, and very much this essence of the Friday at 5 feeling. You've done the work week, now it's time to enjoy the weekend. And from a sort of business perspective, it started out in 2011, sold to Solo Brands, was acquired by Solo Brands in 2021. So basically from 10 years, went from 0 to 130 million. So just a bit of background around the product, the brand, but also the commercial performance of the business as well. Over to you, Brett.
So let's take you back to 2011 and the birth of Chubbies. It was founded by a group of friends from Stanford, and here they are now, that were really repelled by the fashion industry of that time, and cast your mind back in the fashion time machine to what fashion looked like there, of rippling abs. This was really just unappealing to a lot of guys out there, and what the founders saw was a real niche in the market of just real humans wearing clothing, and really reflecting that in everything that we do as a brand. They also saw that shorts were getting longer, with more bells and whistles and everything going on, but they saw a real niche in the market for actually shorter shorts, and more appropriately length shorts, as we like to call them. It kicked off with those initial shorts, and they were consistently sold out for the first 2 years of business. So there was really something there with those shorts. A lot of our early activations were based around college age ambassadors. We had ambassador programs with hundreds of college guys around campuses, really spreading the word of who we are and what we do, and really nurturing that community. We did a lot of kind of viral stunt marketing back in the day when this was a very new thing. And products such as the tearaway shorts, which still live to this day. So if you want to go check those out on chubbies.com, feel free, and they're quite amusing.
I was hoping you might wear those on stage,
Yeah.
Brett, and give us a proper entrance, but there you go. But the reality is, a lot's changed since 2011, when the brand was first formed. The whole sort of concept of college ambassadors has probably moved on, and maybe has a slightly more negative connotation today than it did back in 2011. the way Gen Z perceives masculinity has moved on quite fundamentally from where we were 12 or 13 years ago. And even if you think about the concept of Friday at 5, COVID changed the rules. The working week became much more fluid. We had hybrid working, virtual working, and it was actually really interesting when we spoke to some of our target respondents in qualitative work. A lot of digital nomads who were like, well, Friday at 5 can happen to me at any time during the week. So in some respects, that essence of Friday at 5 and the weekend feeling, it felt a little bit passé when targeting some of these Gen Z audiences. When you think about the customer as well, I'd encourage any of you to look at some of the social media around Chubbies. There is such a passionate and loyal fan base, some of whom have followed the brand through since its very start in 2011. But the reality is those guys are now in their 30s. Guys and girls actually, because a lot of girls really buy into Chubbies as well, but they're in their 30s. And when we looked at the customer profile, the database, it was quite apparent that there was a real gap when it comes to relevance and targeting Gen Z. And also when you think about the founders and the business, like these guys started the business in their mid-20s, now they're in their late 30s. They'll probably hate me for saying that, but they're dads. They've grown up, the business has grown up, it's listed on the New York Stock Exchange as part of solo brands. So a lot has really evolved from a culture, customer and company perspective over those last 10 or 12 years. So that's really where Chubbies, solo brands, engaged us. How do we take this brand further? Huge amount of success over the first decade, exponential growth, but what does the future look like? How do we achieve the next decade of growth? And where is that growth going to come from? So fundamentally, the challenge that we were set was, how do we take the brand from a sort of scrappier startup that's sort of finding its way to a grown-up brand, but still retaining the essence of what makes the brand so special? And the way we did that to really reorientate the brand for future growth was to look at this intersection of customer and culture. Now, the business had a lot of customer information, a lot of transactional data, what people were buying, how frequently, how much they were spending, but there was a bit of a gap in terms of really understanding what motivates these customers, what they're looking for in the future, and specifically thinking about those future customers, there was a real dearth of insight. And then from a cultural perspective, with such a dynamic shifting landscape, what were the trends that we needed to be most relevant to? And what could we really own with a distinctive tone of voice and a distinctive positioning in the market as well? But it's also very important to mention, and this is why we talked about evolution at the start and not revolution, the Chubbies brand wasn't broken when we started working together. Actually, if you distill down the sort of challenges that we work on in growth strategy, there are fundamentally two. One is, my brand's in real distress. Sales performance is going down, help us get back to growth. The second one is sort of where Chubbies sat, which is, we're doing really well, but actually how do you help us achieve the next wave of growth? How do you take us to the next level? And that's essentially what we were doing here. There was so much positive assets and capabilities and culture and people around Chubbies, real distinctiveness, real uniqueness, real relevance in this whole world of fashion and clothing. But how do we make it a bit more grown up? How do we modernize it and make it more relevant for a more diverse and inclusive audience beyond those who have been with the brand all the way through our years? So where we started was a very big piece of customer understanding, customer and non-customer. So qualitative exploration, which then led into a big piece of quantitative segmentation, both customers and non-customers. And as well as looking at some of the behavioural information, it was very much focused on attitudes and values, the sorts of things that would give us that longevity to then think about what is our North Star customer for the next 10 years, and also allow us to span between the past, the present and the future. So enter the weekenders. Now, naturally, we were looking at a segment that offered commercial growth that was big, looked like it was going to grow in the future, but perhaps even more importantly than that, the weekenders really aligned with where the Chubbies brand wanted to be. These weren't the ultra fashionistas, which sort of looked for that capital F fashion. These guys were very much about expressing my unique personality through the clothes I wear. very values-based, very much about making a difference, very much about authenticity, and very much about the joy of connection. And those of you who do segmentations will know that sometimes segments can feel a bit monolithic, right? 20% of the population, or in this case 20% of the male population. I would say the real unlock here was when we came down to Austin last year. We socialized the segments with the whole of the Chubbies team, and we actually did live focus groups. So we had loads of weekenders up on screen, the whole Chubbies team there who could ask questions live. And that was the unlock, because whilst we saw this connective thread around authenticity and expressing my style and freedom and liberty, they're all different races, all different ages, all different ways of identifying, different regions, different backgrounds, which I think really brought it to life for the organisation. So that's the customer piece. Then from the cultural perspective, it was really about understanding, okay, where's the world going, what's going to be most relevant to us, and how do we bring our unique point of view on these matters as well. So again, I'm not going to go through trends like conflict, because there is so much conflict in the world, red versus blue, constant bad news cycle, but actually what Chubbies could bring to the table was this sense of connecting people, bringing people together. Loads of distraction in the world, constantly on our phones, social media, constantly getting different feeds. How does Chubbies help people feel in the moment, help them feel more present, help them really enjoy those more considered moments of connectivity? How do we move away from some of the stereotypes that Brett was talking about with other fashion brands of like ripped abs, to actually more about individuals and welcoming all kinds of one-of-a-kind? And how do we move away from sort of preconceived ideas of masculinity to a much more modern interpretation of what masculinity is? What really sat at the core of that was bringing people together for real. That was the job we could do as the Chubbies brand, fueling the fun, feeding the conversation, consciously connecting and making everybody feel welcome. And the insight that really sat at the heart of this in terms of defining our unique role and purpose was actually when people connect in those most intimate moments with their friends and family, where they can let their guard down and just say and do whatever they want, it gave them a sense of freedom. And that became the central tenet of how we pull together the purpose and role of the Chubbies brand going forward. Freedom to let go from stress. Freedom to laugh and not be too serious in a world that takes itself very seriously. Freedom to live in the moment, free from judgment, and freedom to be your true, authentic self, and not worried about how others think about you or how society perceives you. Back over to you, Brett.
Thank you. So, how did we do this? We got really clear on our customer and culture, and then that really formed the key tenets of how we started to transform the business. It really helped with our internal behaviors and understanding the duality of both customer and culture really allowed us to boost our platform of living life on the bright side, really making sure that values are the center of everything we do. So this shows up internally through our internal hiring and employment. It also allows with onboarding, and then it really allows us to turn up some of the volume on some of the philanthropic things that we do around mental health and different things around those organizations. And then within that as well, it also allows us to look external to how we show up in the marketplace. So we looked at redefining some of our visuals to reflect where we came from, where we're at, and then where we want to be into the future. We put together a few kind of images here of how we started to go about doing that. So you can kind of see it's really bright, optimistic, poppy, and super inclusive. And then that culminated into us making smarter business decisions. With the obsession around the weekender, our core customer segment, it allowed us to make smarter decisions when it came to creating products. So how do we understand their world to make product? It allowed us to talk in a way that they want to be spoken with and not to. It also shows up in the channels that we distribute in from our retail standpoint. And then it also helps us get super clear on who we work with, because obviously we want to make sure that we're working with companies that align really clearly with our values as a company.
Cool. I think we're good. Yeah, I was
done.
Nope, that's cool. Tag team. Well rehearsed. Yeah, so we've taken you there through a very quick tour of how we partner together. The whole sort of inside customer understanding, the trends work around cultural understanding, and really using that to evolve the brand, the way we go to market, the way we think about some of those internal initiatives. So all we wanted to do at the end was just share some of the key principles that we sort of learned as we went through the process. First one is a very obvious one, but if it ain't broke, don't fix it. As I said earlier, there were so many good assets, capabilities, cultural elements about Chubbies that didn't really need fixing. They just needed fine-tuning for the world that we find ourselves in today. So ultimately our advice to any sort of consultancy going in there is respect what's great about the brand and really focus on those areas that really require a bit more work. The second one was about respecting the old and embracing the new. I think all of us as marketers can get very obsessed about where the new sources of growth are coming from. I'm sure we're going to hear loads of talk over the next couple of days around Gen Z. But one of the fundamental learnings here was, how do we really tap into our existing customer base and really understand from them, what do they love about the brand? Where do they want the brand to move in the future? Where does it need to change to make it more relevant to them? But even their next generations, their sons and daughters as well. Now, it didn't mean that we didn't speak to any new customers, but it was very much about respecting the core that had really helped the brand be so successful.
And the last part to that is partner, don't consult. What was great about working with Clear was they really were in it for the long haul with us. They really immersed themselves in the day-to-day culture of the business, in hanging out with us, shooting the proverbial. They really were able to be such an integral part of our team and understood the way that we work. And what came of that was really a great partnership. As an external entity. I've worked with many consultants before, and it was a very different experience with these guys. So thank you, Jim.
You're far too kind, Brett. So final slide. Thank you, everyone, and here's to the weekend, even though it's a couple of days away.
So although we have some time left, there aren't any questions in on the app. So if you do have some questions that you didn't get a chance to ask, please do find Jim and Brett and ask them some questions when they're walking around the event. So thank them again for the really great presentation.